So a couple weeks ago when the Justice League was still very, very fresh and before it became the mockery of the internet because of its various production and box office issues, I was planning to do a review on it, and I kind of recorded a piece of it, but then I was interrupted, and then other stuff came up that demanded my attention that were way more important in my life than talking about the fucking Justice League movie. And so I'm kind of bored right now. I'm doing some writing stuff completely unrelated to superheroes. I've been, hanging out with some of my friends. I've been having, school stuff, but now I have some free time to do some side stuff, and I kind of want to talk about Thor Ragnarok and Justice League. I kind of wanted to do a Thor Ragnarok kind of analysis video to talk about why I think the movie doesn't really work and has kind of a big identity crisis. But I figured I didn't really give you guys a Justice League review, so here is that. I'm going to split this up into two segments. The first segment is going to be kind of like a shorter, non-spoiler review, and the second one is obviously going to be a spoiler segment where I'm going to really try to dissect the movie as much as I can on my own. I've been talking about the Justice League movie and Thor Ragnarok a lot with my friends, really kind of picking apart the movies, kind of talking about the directions that should have been taken. I'm well aware of what scenes in this movie specifically were done by Whedon. I know all the stuff about the Paramount fiasco with Superman's mustache. I know about all that stuff. And I've been reading about what Kevin Smith has been talking about, how there was supposed to be like a dark side scene. The dark side was supposed to be in the actual movie, and they were supposed to have actual New Gods stuff in this movie. So I'm aware of all that stuff. You don't have to tell me about it in the comments. I'm going to try to address all of that stuff as I go in the spoilers section. So my non-spoiler review is kind of like this. This is really, really, really mediocre. It's an okay enough time, I guess, when you're watching it, but it's not. This thing barely qualifies as a movie. Avengers is a film that I don't really hold in a much high regard. It's a movie it's a film that, much like Justice League, is a bog standard. Here's the alien invasion that brings together the heroes storyline. You've seen the storyline a million times, and they've always, always, always sucked ass. They've always been generic, boring, derivative of one another. They have nothing interesting to say or do, but at least all the other stuff I can call a story. Avengers is a really overrated movie, but it is a movie. It feels like a movie. It feels like a production that was done from beginning to end with not a million things trying to constantly screw it over or a bunch of other unforeseen circumstances screwing it over by the end. It does not feel like a big Frankenstein's monster like the Justice League movie does. And that's kind of like the big problem of the Justice League movie, where I see what they were trying to kind of do, maybe, but this whole thing just does not work. And a lot of people talk about how the Zack Snyder cut would have been better. I don't know. I think that a lot of like the appealing stuff, at least the appealing stuff from BVS that I like about that movie, is gone even in the proposed Snyder cut. So I really do think that this movie is just kind of fucked from a conceptual level, and BVS being the interesting madhouse film that it was just kind of possibly a fluke. But going back to Justice League, I guess it's fine as a viewing experience, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work as an ensemble cast. Some performances in it are good. I still like Ben Affleck as Batman. I think that Ray Fisher as Cyborg is pretty damn great. He's probably the only thing in this movie that is actually realized to any kind of satisfactory degree. And that's really impressive because they cut out a lot of shit concerning Cyborg, so that's kind of impressive. I like Jason Momoa as Aquaman. His performance as Aquaman has made me actually want to go back and start reading Aquaman comics again, which is really impressive because Aquaman's a guy I like seeing, but he's never really been one of my favorites. I've liked some storylines with him, but Jason Momoa made me want to read more Aquaman, and just as Ray Fisher made me want to maybe check out if there's some cool Cyborg stuff. So that is a big boon to them. Gal Gadot is fine. Ezra Miller is awful. I don't know what the fuck they were trying to do with it. Well, I know what they were trying to do with Ezra Miller. And it's the same thing they do with Jason Momoa, but here's the difference. Jason Momoa kind of has that Dwayne Johnson quality where he looks like a dude who should be like the meanest bastard you'll ever have the misfortune to meet, but he's actually, pretty cool guy. He's really funny. He's got that charisma. And so when you tell Jason Momoa, hey, dude, just play yourself, you will have a good time, even if you don't see like the character Jason Momoa is supposed to be playing. Jason Momoa himself has enough, those kind of like generic likable qualities about him where he can just be himself, and you'll have a good time watching him and listening to him do stuff. And they kind of want to do the same thing with Ezra Miller, but Miller does not have that charisma at all. He also does not have comedic timing at all. And then when you put him as the comic relief, you get a really fucking annoying version of the Flash. I don't know if this is something that could just be fixed by better direction. I think it could be because I've seen Ezra Miller in other stuff, and he's better in other stuff. So I don't know if this is just an instance where he's an actor who just needs really good direction to get him someplace, and if you just let him do his own thing, he's a disaster area, or if this is a consequence of the reshoots. But honestly, I think that this version of the Flash was just not well handled, even by Snyder from a conceptual standpoint. And so if they announced that they were just going to replace Ezra Miller, or Ezra Miller decides to leave, because I've heard some rumors that Miller is not really pleased with what the hell is going on at DC and Warner Brothers, kind of like Ben Affleck to a less severe extent. So if Miller decided to leave and they decided to recast it with somebody else, I honestly would not, call foul on it. In fact, I think it could be a potential massive improvement. So yeah, Steppenwolf is a big load of nothing. I mean, Kieran Hines, he kind of hams it up. There are a few scenes where I do find him kind of enduring in that Green Goblin, Sam Raimi kind of way, where Kieran Hines is just really, really hamming it up. So I think he's kind of fun there. But he's just another big, gray, armored dude. And I watched a video very recently that talks about this annoying superhero movie trend where they keep throwing in big dudes in gray armor for people to punch and fight. And sometimes it works. Like, Doomsday is always big and gray, so him being a big gray monster makes sense, I guess, with the comics. But Steppenwolf's design is really kind of shitty. Like, they're going for the New 52 version of him, but they don't do it all the way. Like, the New 52 version of Steppenwolf has this, black and red design. And of course, the black and red combination is not original by any stretch of the imagination. But he also had like this kind of cool fire motif about him. And for a dude who is known as like the end of worlds and whose axe is on fire, I think they could have added in something like that throughout his suit to make it at least more visually interesting. Because, and this is a similar thing that Marvel kind of had this year, where we already had a dude in gray armor be the bad guy in one of these movies, and that was in Wonder Woman. Now they're doing it again. Kind of similar, like how we had two big zany adventure space movies from Marvel with Guardians 2 and Thor Ragnarok. So yeah, Steppenwolf is kind of entertaining when he hams it up, but really, he really was supposed to be a setup for another thing, and I'm going to get to that in the spoiler review. And if it sounds like I don't have much to say about this movie, because there's nothing much to say about it. This is a movie you talk about mostly for what the fuck went wrong with it and what it should have done to improve things. Oh yeah, and Superman, the new Superman, is absolutely awful. It is still Henry Cavill, and I really like him. I really like what he did. I think he's been massively underrated. I think a lot of, the complaints about, DCU Superman are kind of blown out of proportion. I get where they're coming from, but I liked this iteration of Superman. And what they do with him in this movie is really pointless. It doesn't serve the character in any way, and it is probably some of the most cynical, fanboy, pandering bullshit I have ever seen in a superhero movie, but I can't talk about it until the spoiler stuff. So that's kind of my non-spoiler review of Justice League. It's fine, I guess, but it's not really good. And it's not even a Thor Ragnarok level not good, where it has at least one element that really elevates the entire experience. Like Thor Ragnarok is a mess. It's an underwritten disaster area of a movie, but at least Thor Ragnarok has, good fight scenes, and it also has a very distinct visual. Well, not distinct. It has a visual style, and it's got something at least on that level to keep you engaged. Justice League doesn't do that. Snyder feels like he's been severely watered down in post-production, and Joss Whedon has no cinematic style to speak of, and so you can't even say, oh, well, this is a mediocre movie, but holy shit, the visuals are freaking amazing. And you can't even say that about it. You can't even say the score was good this time because Danny Elfman's music is really bad. And I know why it's bad, because much like the rest of the movie, it was rushed and made in the span of a few weeks, and Danny Elfman didn't even have proper footage to score certain segments of the movie. And so I was going to give Danny Elfman way more shit about the score in this video, in the past video that I was originally going to do a couple weeks ago. But after I read that particular article, I actually feel really, really bad about the guy. And I'm honestly shocked that there are even a couple songs in the soundtrack that I can vaguely recall outside the Cohen song Everybody Knows. So yeah, Justice League, Frankenstein's monster. It's a mess. You probably have a decent time watching it, but boy, does it not work whatsoever. So now we're going to go on to the spoiler review, and holy shit, where am I even going to start with this? Christ. Fuck. Okay, let's start with the editing of the first act. Now, a lot of people have voiced a lot of criticisms about the editing of Suicide Squad and the theatrical version of BVS. And once again, I get the complaints, but the editing never overtly bothered me. It was very obviously just kind of a psychedelic mess in Suicide Squad, and it was very much a hack job with BVS. But it never bothered me that much because at least there was something there that was kind of getting me into the viewing experience. But with Justice League, the first act is edited so horribly. There are so many scenes that just do not flow into one another. The entire opening with Batman fighting the Parademon is really pointless. And I really hate it. This is something that the Avengers did too, where the last movie ends on Batman and Wonder Woman know that Steppenwolf is coming, so they are going to assemble the Justice League preemptively to fight him. And in the marketing material, i.e. the earlier trailers before the production went truly to hell, we see that Batman and Wonder Woman are doing exactly that. They know Steppenwolf is coming, and they are taking measures to prepare for it. And I know that the movie was supposed to open firstly with the Steppenwolf backstory, and then we were supposed to begin with Batman trying to recruit Aquaman. Here, Whedon, in his reshoot material, he does the fucking thing from the first Avengers movie, where the Avengers are assembling, and then they don't, and then we have to explain who everybody is again, or for the first time, as is the case with the Justice League, and then we gotta assemble the Avengers, even though we were trying to assemble them before, and then we stopped for no reason whatsoever. It's a problem that both Avengers and Justice League have, but the Avengers at least had the excuse of, well, Hulk's in hiding, and Thor isn't here anymore, and we haven't got Captain America yet, so at least there was context to make it less annoying in the Avengers. In this movie, the last fucking scene of BVS, one of the last scenes, is Batman and Wonder Woman are gonna go recruit the Justice League. And then, in this movie, they don't do that because reasons. The entire Parademon opening sequence is really stupid and really pointless. They really should have just not opened with it. Just start with the Leonard Cohen song where Superman is dead, have the Watchmen-style opening credits, and jump into the movie. Start either with Steppenwolf attacking Themyscira or Diana, thwarting the bank robbery, seeing what's happened in Athens when the arrow is shot, and then mingle in Steppenwolf somewhere in between that. The entire editing is really stupid. There are several really pointless scenes throughout the entire thing. It does not work. And if you need Batman to fight a fucking parademon on his own before he goes to, like, recruit Aquaman, why not make that the flashback scene? Why don't you have a scene where Batman is investigating how Star Labs scientists are being abducted, and people are accusing Batman of doing it, which is a part of this film, and then Batman fights a parademon in Gotham, and that is kind of like maybe a flashback segment or something, because in the context of the film, people are already saying, oh, Batman's gone fucking crazy again, and he's abducting people, and because the parademons kind of look like Batman, and people from far away are assuming that the parademons are Batman. So that's a thing that is in this movie, and in a better script, someone would say, oh, you know, if you have to have Batman fight a parademon before the shit hits the fan, having him investigate this stuff would be a really cool way to maybe like show up the detective side of Batman, maybe do something like that. But of course we don't do that. The opening scene, like I said, with Batman fighting the parademon in the context that we have in the existing film is really fucking stupid. And the entire first act, the entire like first 30, 40 minutes of it is just an absolute mess. It's really badly done. Apparently, the Steppenwolf backstory was supposed to be like the true opening of the film. It's supposed to be kind of like the Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring opening, which makes a lot of sense. And apparently they were supposed to even be like dialogue between characters and stuff. Like Hippolyta was supposed to talk with Ares and that kind of stuff, and they were supposed to actually plan stuff out. And then we kind of get to the big thematic stuff of the movie. This movie is kind of trying to play on the whole idea of a world without Superman. And how can a world without Superman survive without him in a big crisis type situation? And I feel like that's the kind of story that necessitates a few kind of bold, creative decisions that this movie is not super intent on doing. The first thing that really hampers this whole idea of how can we survive without Superman is that Steppenwolf is not enough of a threat. And this is a thing that is made problematic at the very end of the film, where Superman just curb stomps Steppenwolf completely. But even before that, when Steppenwolf is able to hold his own against several members of the Justice League, you still really get the sense that he isn't that much of a big deal. And one of the things that kind of makes him feel really small and insignificant next to Doomsday, or especially Zod, is the fact that we never really get any kind of big feats from him. Like, if Steppenwolf's personality is going to be the most generic shit ever, at least make his powers and abilities something insane to where you go, holy shit, this guy is going to freaking annihilate us all. And I think part of the problem is that this movie is really bad at utilizing the powers and abilities of the characters. Cyborg's powers are used in really cool and really fascinating ways. They're half the reason I like the guy as is. But Wonder Woman, in her solo movie, she kind of starts tapping into the power of the gods. And throughout the entire Justice League movie, I was expecting Diana to do the same thing. I was expecting her to like hold back and then cut loose, and then you would see like two gods just go at it. And I feel like that kind of battle between an unhinged Diana and unleashed Steppenwolf alone would show off, the power of the respective characters. And when Diana is beaten at her best, that's probably the point where you say, oh shit, we should probably get Superman if God no Diana can't win. That's what a good writing would do. Good writing would also probably do something with the Flash. And the Flash is really pointless in this movie. Like, he's okay for arresting civilians, but throughout the entire movie, I was kind of hoping that they would do something cool with his powers, where, Flash would have to use his powers to fight a lot. And they even lampshade it in the movie where Flash says he's never properly fought anybody. All he does is rescue people. And in a better movie with a setup like that, you would have some payoff, some moment where Steppenwolf is beating the shit out of the Justice League, and then Barry just goes crazy. Barry runs faster than he's ever run before, and he just punches Steppenwolf in the face so hard, so fast, the motherfucking sound barrier just gets annihilated, and he like rips off half of Steppenwolf's face or something. That's what you do in a movie with proper setup and proper payoff, and that alone would have really made the Flash look cool. But throughout the entire movie, Flash feels like just kind of an accessory. There are several action scenes where I'm expecting the Flash to do something, and then he just vanishes out of the movie, and then he reappears. He does kind of help out. He rescues, like I said, he rescues civilians, but this movie is really bad about utilizing the Flash. I really do feel like that whole setup of I'm bad at fighting people, it needs to have a payoff where the Flash decides to truly fight somebody, and then you see some of the powers of the Flash. As is, he's just kind of like a shittier version of Quicksilver from Doff, and that's really sad. Another character that gets kind of shortchanged is actually Jason Momoa's Aquaman. Jason Momoa is really good at playing a dude who's kind of like supposed to be kind of similar to Aquaman, but much like The Flash, they set up something where Batman kind of a few times throughout the movie, Batman talks about how Arthur's power is just that he's strong and that he mostly talks to fish. And kind of like the Flash thing, in a better movie, you set that up as kind of a thing with the character and then you pay it off with something at the end. Aquaman should have had a fucking sea monster or something, like a giant squid or something, rise out of the ocean at his command and just annihilate a bunch of parademons and help turn the tide against Steppenwolf. There's no payoff to you talk to fish right. They just use it for a couple gags and a couple snarky comments, and then for the rest of the movie, Aquaman is just kind of like a shittier version of this holding back Wonder Woman. He punches hard, he can jump far, and he can stab stuff, but that's it. And much like the Flash, they kind of set up something where they're not utilizing their powers to their greatest degree, and I feel like that both he and the Flash should have had some moment where they just show off what they can really do, to show off why they're worthy of being on this team, because as it stands, they're kind of just pointless. Batman is kind of like this too, but at least the Justice League movie kind of presents it as that Batman is he's way out of his depth in this film. Like, Batman can barely fight a single parademon or two before he has to like get a car or a vehicle or something to save him. And this is an inherent problem of putting Batman on the Justice League because, unlike the Avengers, even in the comic books, the DC heroes are ridiculously powerful. They are insanely strong individually, and when you put them on a team together, you pretty much have one of the strongest combined teams in any fictional medium you can possibly think of. It's not like the Marvel Universe or the 616 or the MCU, where even the higher powered people like Thor and Hulk are massively, downplayed, and you've got lots of like lower tier people on there. The Justice League is just really super high powered, and this has always kind of created like this problem of, well, what the fuck is Batman gonna do? Batman can't fight hard enough, he can't run hard enough, and he can't do all this other stuff hard enough as good as the other characters, so why is he on here? And so a lot of writers pretty justifiably, I think, struggle with the whole idea of having Batman even be on the Justice League. And I feel like in a movie like this, you probably should have to give Batman some kind of strategic element. Maybe have Batman show off that he's like maybe like the smartest guy there, that he's like the most strategic, to maybe justify that, because in this movie he just seems like a fat old man who's trying to keep up with the cool new kids, and he's just way, way out of his league. But unlike Flash and Aquaman, where they kind of set this up and then there's no payoff for it, Batman being kind of out of his element is something that's referenced quite a bit throughout the movie. What I don't really like about Batman in this movie is that his arc has no real resolution. One of my friends said that Batman should have died here as like a recompense for what happened in BVS, and I kind of agree with him. Like, the movie has that moment where Batman's like luring the parademons away, and it's supposed to be like Batman's self-sacrifice, but the parademons are not enough of a threat by themselves to make this seem like a big deal. It should be kind of like one of those big moments where Batman is about to die or something, and then the team comes in to save him, and the whole thing feels unearned. It doesn't really elicit any kind of emotions or anything, and it just doesn't really work. Batman's just kind of he's just kind of, I guess, nicer now, and that's his whole arc going forward. But in the context of this film, it feels like Batman is a dude who wants redemption. He's not really a good person, but he kind of wants to be that. He kind of wants to hold up to some kind of example, and there's no real payoff for this. And I feel like the biggest missed opportunity of the entire film is the whole idea of unity. The film has a backstory where the Atlanteans, the Amazonians, and the humans, and the various gods, and even Green Lantern Corps, all these people come together in spite of their various differences, and in spite of the fact that they will betray and try to kill one another very soon afterward. All these people come together to stop this kind of big apocalyptic event. And I feel like the biggest missed opportunity of this film is that you should have paralleled that in the modern day. And I feel like there's a really good setup for it in the movie, because this whole movie is about the fact that everybody is scared that Superman is dead, that Superman is gone, violence and terrorism is on the up because Superman is dead. And this is kind of like one of the messy things of the DCEU that I'm going to get into later on in the video. But let's just, for the sake of argument, say that in spite of Superman's controversy, despite the fact that Superman had a really disastrous debut in this universe, Superman's existence is a big deterrent. If you know that there's a superpowered guy who can hear everything and who can just smash through everything you can throw at him, constantly patrolling the planet, criminals and terrorists are going to think twice about doing anything because they don't want to fuck with Superman. In spite of any controversial things about him, Superman's very existence would be a deterrent for more violence and that kind of stuff. So I think in that kind of context, this whole setup works. And the whole opening segment about the film is kind of like about how the world is going to shit because Superman is gone. And I think that's a really great setup for this whole idea of unity. This whole idea of that mankind, the Amazonians and the Atlanteans, all of us have to come back together to fight this big apocalyptic monster from our past. And this time, instead of the old gods, it's the new gods, quote unquote, aka the Justice League, rising to the challenge and being the big champions of this new alliance between men, Atlanteans, and Amazons. I think if the movie went in that direction, it would have been way, way, way better. The problem is that even if they did do this, a lot of it would feel very unearned, and this is the part where I have to kind of complain about the DCEU. And the DCEU is a universe that is too into the fanboy mentality. And what I mean by that is the DCEU expects us too much to fill in the blanks for things we don't really know. Because if this universe was much closer to like the regular comic book universe, and then it kind of diverged from some point on, you could say, oh, we'll just use the comics to fill in, I don't know, Superman's, 18-month stint between Man of Steel and BVS, or use this to fill in the gaps for Batman. The problem is this is not the same universe as the comic books, and this is a universe that is very different from the comics in a lot of really, really big ways, but these movies expect you to still kind of use the baseline comic book versions to fill in the blanks. So between the big epic battle of Man of Steel to the beginning of BVS, there are things in BVS that showcase that Superman was just doing regular Superman things, and he wasn't always a controversial figure, but we don't see that on the big screen. We see a Superman who has a very different starting point, and then we see Superman who's getting broken down by Lex Luthor's various machinations, but we never really get to see the quote-unquote default Superman of the DCEU. We're just left to infer on that based on information that's there, but it's not good enough to really fill in the blanks. And this is a big problem the DCEU has, where you have to be like a super big fanboy of the source material to fill in the blanks, but you have to be flexible enough as a fan to not be bothered by the various changes. And speaking as someone who knows comic book people, expecting them to be fine with changes that don't pander to their inner fantard is like asking a sun that's about to go out and explode to not explode. So that's a big problem with the DCEU, and it's a big problem here because I don't know how the fuck you do the New Gods in this movie, even in a 4 hour runtime, because the New Gods is kind of like a big high concept thing you need to set up over multiple films, then pay it off. Atlantis is kind of a big deal. You can't introduce Atlantis in a Justice League movie and then do what I suggested earlier, where you have to introduce them, you have to show off their hesitance to help the surface world, and then you have to have like a big fuck yeah moment where Atlantis shows up to help the surface world. You cannot do that in one movie. Maybe if you have like 5 or 6 hours, you could do it, but you cannot do it in one movie. And that's why I say that even my proposed idea of making the rest of the Justice League movie like a parallel to the beginning, where all of these various factions have to come together, kind of torn apart from one another at their lowest low. They all have to rise above that to save the world together. Even that whole premise does not really work because there's so much shit we don't know about the DCU. There's so much shit that we've yet to learn that we probably never will learn because Warner Brothers, they don't know what the fuck they're doing with these movies, and that's coming from a guy who's liked most of their output from this universe, warts and all. And so even my proposed idea of doing like this mythological take on the whole thing, it would still be nigh impossible for anybody to fucking do it without at least 2 or 3 other movies to properly set it up. And the whole idea of a world without Superman is an interesting concept in and of itself, but Superman's entire thing in this film is so shit, it does not fucking work at all. So Superman's revival has nothing to do with the whole dirt rising. So that's a plot point, another thing from BVS that does not hold over. I'm not overtly bothered by the resurrection. I knew that they were going to do it. But like I said, if you're going to revive Superman, you have to make Steppenwolf feel like a legitimate threat. You have to have everybody throw their best at him, have him like swatted away like flies, and then maybe keep Superman as the last resort. And it's really weird because the movie even points out that there's a really good chance that Superman could come back wrong or like a monster the same way Doomsday was. And it's really weird for Batman to immediately jump to reviving Superman after an all-right battle with Steppenwolf after the fact that he sees an apocalyptic vision of the future where an evil, probably insane Superman helps clearly Steppenwolf or apocalyptic forces conquer the planet to raise Superman from the dead. But whatever, like the nightmare sequence does not matter. Even in the original Snyder Cut, from what I've read, the nightmare sequence was just a big load of bullshit meant to hype people up that ultimately does not matter whatsoever. So whatever. They revive Superman. Superman fights them all, and this kind of like foreshadows a big problem at the end of the movie where Superman is just so fucking tastically more powerful than everybody that the entire Justice League feels completely pointless and superfluous to even exist in this universe. And then Superman goes with Lois, he meets Maxwell with his mom, and then he turns into a fucking cartoon character. This is a horrid exaggeration of not just the Reeves version, but also a massive exaggeration of what Superman usually is considered as. And it's awful. Henry Cavill does not handle that kind of stuff well. In fact, Henry Cavill's voice makes the lines where Superman is supposed to become like lighthearted and that kind of shit feel really forced and really horrible. Like when he tells Flash slowpoke, it's delivered so awkwardly and it just doesn't work. And the whole question of what is a world without Superman, or can a world without Superman exist, it kind of doesn't mean anything at the end. And in fact, I feel like Superman maybe should have stayed dead for this movie. I feel like having just these 5 core members of the Justice League figure out what they're going to do with one another, how they're going to deal with the fact that they don't have a big gun to protect them, at least power-wise, I think that's an interesting enough concept for a movie. And in fact, that actually makes Superman's eventual return and death more poignant because time is going to pass, people are going to kind of move on, and then when the Justice League maybe feels like they're comfortable, maybe that they have a handle on the situation, when Darkseid shows up in an inevitable other movie, Superman's return can feel like a big deal because now humanity is back at full power. So I kind of feel like they maybe should have kept Superman dead in this movie just to truly answer what is a world without Superman. And that just does not really have any kind of satisfying resolution. Superman has no character arc. He kind of feels like the same person he used to be in the previous films, but when he shows up to fight Steppenwolf, he's just a caricature. He's a fucking cartoon character. It's awful. It's horrendous. I cannot believe people are actually watching this movie, listening to that dialogue delivery and the way he's acting and thinking to themselves that's good. Well, I get why. It's the most basic fan wank version of Superman you can throw out there to placate people who think they know what the fuck Superman is. But it does make sense with the previous two movies, with this guy's personality. It just does not make sense. It feels like a really cynical, fan winky answer to a problem that actually takes effort to fix. But that's kind of like the DC motto. If we try a new direction, we'll fuck up a lot, and then when people decidedly don't like it, we're just going to double back to nostalgia and fan waking to make you guys instantly forgive us again, because that's what works. The reason Rebirth, a mostly majoritively shit line of comic books, is super successful and super critically acclaimed is because that they double down on the old stuff people like, instead of trying to make their new direction actually work with good storytelling. And so it's really nice to see the movies reflect that as well. And of course, I mean that with full sarcasm. And the whole idea of Superman mattering is really undermined because nobody really gives a shit about Superman. Batman does, Wonder Woman kind of does, Flash doesn't care about him, Cyborg doesn't care about him, Aquaman doesn't care about him. Aquaman not caring about him is really weird because apparently Aquaman helps save Superman in Man of Steel, but there's nothing in the movie that implies that. Like, Superman doesn't mean anything to the vast majority of the Justice League, and I feel like that should change. Like, for example, they set up Flash as this really big social outcast in the film, that he just cannot really communicate with people, and I feel like using Superman as a reason for why the Flash is not a true public persona would be a really cool idea, because Flash, as the Flash in costume, he's able to kind of cut loose, he's able to be himself as he truly is. But then he sees the way the world treats Superman and he realizes, I can't be a public hero, I'm already kind of a massive social outcast. If I become a massive, hated figure or controversial figure like Superman, I'm gonna lose even the fun time I had as the Flash. If they did some kind of angle like that to tie in the Flash into Superman, to maybe to have Superman affect Flash's life and his decision making, that would have been actually kind of cool, and I think that would have fit in majoritively what we know about this version of the Flash. And similar things could have been done with Cyborg and Aquaman and that kind of stuff, and you could have found these really cool ways to see how Superman was able to affect these people in ways that he can't affect other people, because Superman was always kind of you always thought he was going to be kind of alone in the world, and then seeing him affect people unknowingly that are closer to like him than he ever realized, and he never really met them. I think that would have been a really cool way to kind of tie the Justice League together. But as it stands, Superman doesn't mean really jack shit to the vast majority of the team. So that doesn't work either. So yeah, this whole thing is kind of a big mess. There's a lot of things that kind of set up for good payoff, but the payoff doesn't happen. A lot of the things that are kind of wrong with this are kind of problems that exist with the DCEU in general, where they expect you to fill in the blanks based on next to no information, or the information that's not super well represented. And one person explained this problem really well. It's like watching a TV show where you never see the base version of the characters. The characters are always going through some big major shift, and the only inclination you see of them at their regular times of their regular lives is kind of small hints, but everything else is just big, epic, and constantly changing them. But you can't keep, you can't really do that. You can't really have like these big sweeping story arcs if you don't really have like a good foundation to work off of. And this is kind of why reason why people had a lot of people had real big problems kind of latching on to DCU Superman, because we don't have a story where we just see this Superman doing his regular thing. We just see the story that kicks him off and the story that kills him, but there's no middle ground. We can kind of like infer to the middle ground from like stuff from Man of Steel and BVS, but it's not really enough. And that problem doesn't overtly bother me, but I recognize it as a problem, and it has killed a lot of people's uh, enjoyment of not just Superman, but a lot of the DCU material, because a lot of the DCU stuff is treated like that. Like BVS and Justice League are movies made with the mentality of, oh, everybody knows what McDefault Superman is, everyone knows what McDefault Atlantis is, what the fourth world is. I can just change that stuff around and you can just fill in the blanks yourself. But nobody knows what the fuck. I mean, people know what Atlantis is, but they don't know what the DC version of Atlantis is. And I know for a fact that people do not know what the fucking fourth world is. I vividly remember an event almost 2 years ago when I was showing my sister BVS on a shit can torrent. And she asked me, okay, what is the Omega symbol? And then I just looked at her. And I tried not to burst out laughing. And then I started explaining to her what the fuck Darkseid is, what New Genesis is, what Apocalypse is. And Jesus Christ. It was insane. Like, no, Snyder, people do not know what the fourth world is. The vast majority of people don't know what the fourth world is. How most of the people who think they know Kirby, they don't know Kirby because they actually haven't fucking read Is Kirby's New Gods. I did, so I know, but a lot of people don't, and they just base off the DC animated version, which, spoiler alert, changes a lot of stuff there too. So yeah, this movie is kind of a mess. This is a movie that needed at least 2 other movies to help it have any kind of satisfactory payoff. And I also feel like it's a movie that needs a desperate sequel, and not the Injustice League stuff, but the Darkseid stuff to follow up on it, because this was originally supposed to be like a 2-part story. And this very much does feel like a thing that leads into another big thing. But because this movie excises so many of the fourth world stuff, it just feels like, okay, we just fought another alien invasion that's not tied to anything, or it's tied to something that we haven't explored at all in this universe. So there that is. And now we're going to have the Injustice League instead. Which, okay, using the Injustice League is not a really bad idea, because I can kind of see Warner Brothers thinking, okay, Marvel's beaten us to the punch with Thanos. Marvel is going to do the big evil overlord thing, even though that's not what Thanos fucking is. He's not a generic evil overlord empire of armies and shit, but okay. Marvel's beaten us to that. We can't do Darkseid, at least not so close together to Thanos, because people are going to call us ripoffs, and yada, yada, yada. So let's do the thing where we're going to build up the villains. So we're going to have a bunch of movies where, I don't know, Aquaman's going to fight Black Manta and Ocean Master, and then Black Manta and Ocean Master are going to like show up as bad guys in Justice League 2 under Luthor. We got Luthor. We're probably going to get Cheetah or something in Wonder Woman, and we could probably, I don't know, get Sivana or Black Adam as well. So we're going to build up to an Injustice League where we're going to build up the villains now, and the villains and heroes are going to fight. So I think that's actually a cool direction to take. That's actually one of the reasons why I was really interested in that proposed Sinister Six film, where we're going to use the various Spider-Man movies to build up the villains, and then it's the villains who team up on the hero. I think that's actually a cool concept. I think that's kind of like a cool reversal of what the Avengers did, and I liked it as a concept in the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, and I think that's a cool concept to do with DC, because DC is clearly going to be less inclined to kill off their bad guys moving forward, I guess. So that's going to be kind of like a cool little break. But very obviously, this is supposed to be like the first part of a 2-part storyline, and I feel like it needed two other movies to help properly set it up, and it needs a sequel to properly pay it off. But I don't know. I feel like this whole universe. I like the conceptual things about it and that kind of stuff, and I like even a lot of the execution, warts and all. But I don't know, guys. I feel like this is a universe that's just kind of really collapsing in on itself, and it just might just be unsalvageable. I know Aquaman's coming. I know Shazam is coming, and Wonder Woman 2. I know those three are most definitely going to be made, but I don't know. I don't know how they salvage things from this. Oh yeah, and this is a thing that they cut out from the movie that really annoys the shit out of me. Lois Lane and Superman were supposed to meet up with Perry fucking White and explain to Perry White that Clark Kent was always Superman, and that was supposed to be used to explain how the three of them came up with a story to say, oh, Clark Kent was not really dead, he was supposed to do this, this, and that, and now Clark Kent is alive. That is not in the fucking movie, and that really annoys me because you cannot kill Superman and Clark Kent in an open casket funeral and then bring Clark Kent back and say jack and shit about it. You cannot do that. That is insane. Like, okay, you want to have Superman's suit be fixed? Fine. He does something with the suit and it fixes itself. Whatever. Like, I'm not really overly annoyed with like Superman's suit fixing itself because Superman's suit like randomly changed from Man of Steel to BVS to Justice League anyway, so whatever. That's not a problem, but fucking Clark Kent being alive and nobody seemingly caring about it, you have to have a scene that says something about that. You can't just ignore it. And yeah, I know what the hell happened to this movie. I know who fucked it. I know where it got fucked, how hard, how slow, how rough. I know all the various fuckings that were involved with the creation of this Frankenstein's monster. Honestly, I think this movie tanking is probably a good thing for the DCEU. I think it's a good thing because it's going to probably tell them, seriously, fuck off already. Just let creative people do good work. And I think it's actually a really big calling call for the DC movies. And I hope the DC movies take after Fox now. I hope they realize that the DC Extended Universe is now in a very similar position to where Fox's X-Men franchise was after X3 and Origins pissed away a lot of the goodwill the franchise had built up. Fox earned back the trust of people. They made First Class, which is really damn good. Wolverine, which is an underrated film as fuck. Days of Future Past, which is pretty great. Deadpool, a movie I don't particularly like, but it was really, really successful and popular. Apocalypse was a dud. Logan was fucking awesome. Fox saw that they fucked up, and they took steps to fix it. The DC movies are in a very similar position now. The DC movies have to be made cheaper now. No more $250 million plus features. That's insane. That's excessive. Lower box office projections. Letting good creative people do their work. If they make like 2 or 3 like really, really good movies in a row, and then they decide, okay, we're going to start prepping for another Justice League movie, I think people are going to turn around on them. People have given, like I said, they gave Fox another chance, even though Fox screwed up. They've given Spider-Man a third chance, which is, of course, tied to the MCU. So yeah, I do think that the DCU is kind of a big disaster area right now, but I do think that they could eventually end up fixing it if they do it like Fox did, where they truly learn from this box office disaster and say, okay, we're going to just focus on making good movies. We're not going to focus too much on the shared universe. We might like not kill our bad guys so that when we want to do an Injustice League movie, we can do that. That's fine. That's a good direction to take. I approve of that. But yeah, Justice League as it stands, I knew it was going to be a box standard superhero movie. It kind of tricked me with the idea that we might have something more to say and do about its characters, but it says practically nothing, and what it does say gets no real payoff or any kind of satisfying payoff, and all around, it's a big fucking disaster area. So, those are my thoughts on Justice League. I spent nearly an hour talking about this shit. Holy crap, I can't believe I did it, but there it is.